Chapter 8, Rules. I told them all that had happened, and now they knew almost everything I had gone through to get to this conclusion. I was hoping I didn't need to say any more. So days went by, and soon months, then a year, till one day I asked our pilot John what we needed to do to keep prying eyes off of us, as Drew's plane was a legal concern, and flying the plane became very soon your part in this. He answered, "Well, unless you are cleared for a straight-in approach, you must turn in a traffic pattern, left-hand turns unless the A/FD says otherwise. Or did you mean, must you submit a flight plan?" "I have no idea. You tell me." First, airspace, and later, we all hoped in orbit, in space. It was time for me to learn more. He continued, "Usually when traveling to space, you must submit a flight plan, as you will transit Class A, also requiring an instrument rating and an IFR capable plane. You might be able to fly VFR over the coast and cross the ADIZ and then transmit to space above 17,999 feet. As far as I know, the IFR only Class A restrictions end outside the ADZ. Of course, you will have to re-enter the ADIZ. Me," he said, "I always submit a flight plan when I travel, unless I'm saying VFR, and then even I always request a flight following that. I've also found HIWAS to be unreliable in space, so you'll definitely want to get a complete weather briefing from FlightWatch, 1-800-992-7433. This is part of what happens if you are smart." He handed me this, and then, "Use this link to learn more." "I'll talk to you in a little while. Let me give this to Drew," I said. I then went to see what was on that link. I talked to Drew about the welds he was doing for the gyroscopes. We looked through that link for about 15 minutes. I met up with John again and said, "Good stuff to know, that you should keep us under the radar." "What I told you earlier should do it," he answered. I brought up, "What about after you file a flight plan, let's say for Europe, and then you go out over the Atlantic to test the device?" I said, "to be safe." He replied, "I have no idea what happens when you file an international IFR flight plan and then attempt to close it over international waters. I am an IFR-rated private pilot, a month or so from a commercial endorsement, but I have zero experience with international flights and darn little practical experience with IFR flight. On the rare occasion that I file an IFR flight plan, I fly into towered airports, so I request a visual approach and cancel in the air unless I need to shoot an approach for currency, and then I cancel with the tower once I reach DA and do not intend to go missed." He then asked, "How do you plan to get an N number for your airplane?" "You have to have one, you know. The plane will need one since it is faded and unreadable." "Yes, I know. Drew needs to look it up. He told me a while back there should be a record of that. When he finds it, he'll paint it back on. The plane hasn't flown in a while. He'll be doing all the necessary checks first also. John knew what we were up to and later offered to help Drew go over it. If you need a test pilot and you're going to be at Volcaria Airport or Melbourne with the plane, give me a call. I'll put it through its paces for you. I could also do this from Orlando, OIA, if need be. Amy was right. He would want to be in on this. Great, I said. Drew's going to be doing other things, and his pilot license is expired, so I'll let him know. Also, you will go over the plane with him since it has sat for so long. Besides that, his eyesight is so bad he knows better than to try to fly right now. Outstanding. Everything is falling into place, I thought to myself. John said, I think the smallest of the 3 airports around here is Volcaria. The one that's nearest and very obscure would be the one to use, and it's only a few miles from here. We just have to get it there with a trailer. Does Drew have the capabilities to do that? Probably, but if not, we'll make one. Drew walked over later after he did the research online and said, I found the N number for the plane. I just got it from the previous owner. We'll just repaint it on the tail. Magic Square came over from nearby and added, after a test in the field of the Earth mates, we'll calculate the scale we need for the drive system I have in mind for a self-sustained version for a microgravity situation, only if you blokes are correct. That's only if it shows us a great enough result in motion and lift. We'll have to build it airtight with a life support system. We'll copy NASA's designs for that. He continued, and then, if unhindered in a microgravity situation, as it should be, then there is no upward limit to the speeds we could achieve up to C or the speed of light, or maybe even beyond that. His eyes rolled up in a thought, and he continued, we can demonstrate movement in the plane, and the tests would be not unlike the lifter experiments that I have watched. All of you are familiar with those experiments, right? Everyone nodded yes. Magic said, except this next device should lift and move with its energy source and not be tethered to the ground by a power supply or another conveyance. We have something they don't have, the key. We aren't going to have that problem. But first things first. I have found the right forms of electricity to use in the right order. I have been gone for a while, for a long time in the woods. That got big, did it? I asked, referring to the lifter experiments. He said yes, but they are stuck. It won't lift its power source. We should see some of the same results as them, as in the ionization of the hull, just as they did, which will be a good sign. After John talked to Drew for a while about what we had discussed earlier, John said, I have to leave to go run some chores. See you all later when I pick up Amy. He turned and kissed her and left. Thanks, John, I said, and the others repeated their gratitude. Carl then continued the conversation and asked Magic, so if we can do that, then all we have to do is increase the size and power input for a greater reaction. For every reaction, there must be an equal or opposite reaction. That's what Newton's laws states. Magic answered, yes, that's what we are getting ready to do, amplify the workforce with an increase in the input, increase its power source exponentially and on the right frequency with the right or best source of electrical current and circuitry, that would mean an exponential increase in its capabilities of workforce. Drew then said, would that make it an unequal reaction? Magic said yes, mate. That is where the known physics breaks down, and why there hasn't been new discoveries in that field since the 40s. Now we have a key, and the breakdown is more movement or speed as I see it. Then Magic added, we should be able to show in the field of the Earth that it will defeat the gravitational pull on the craft with nothing more than the electrical field above and below the Earth. When the device is activated, and since we are going to use gold as a sensor wrapped in a coil of copper wire, and the fact that the gold doesn't magnetize, it would have to rely on the field of the Earth and its electrical nature and the vortex the coils makes. It will cast a singularity to attract two at the same time, repelling like riding a wave. Well then, there it is, Magic said. Let's get back to work. Everyone worked quietly for an hour or so when Big M spoke up again. Here's what I came up with, Mike, about what you said before about the contact you had. That last craft you seen was meant to be a benefit for us all and the whole world by showing us the crystals. There is really no telling just yet, though, since the message you received, you say, was partial or disrupted. Carl added, no matter what, we have a major discovery, and someone is pointing the way, and it's a way that doesn't destroy or pollute. The strange thing is, it might be a time traveler. Amy added, there's a reason that someone keeps coming back in time and keeping an eye on you, if that is the case, manipulating you, which could be good or bad. That's interesting, I said. I didn't get a real close enough look at his face, but the vibe from him was as if I knew him somehow. I asked, if it is a higher form of physics that this can lead to, then is it something we are allowed to possess at this time? And if so, does it escalate into more spin-offs in our immediate future? Good or bad? Is time travel even on the table with this type of physics? Or is he spiritual in nature in a bad way, because it did stop me from tinkering with this and scared me for a few years while I considered about going on with this after I made the first working device. Magic continued. If it is spiritual in nature, they could possibly be using the same principles with different machines or capabilities for movement, or the physics they use in their realm works here also. The same physics works here. It has to be the next step in our evolution that has been hidden. Since I am a Christian, I believe in the principality of good and evil, which is the core belief of the religion. Think about it. The fallen ones want us to fail. We were the ultimate crown of creation in the beginning, and that has been their goal from the beginning of the fall, since they are not under the blanket of grace. They want to take us down with this. Amy spoke up. That could be true. They want us to destroy the world and us. Then she asked, how would we know for sure? Magic chimed in. If you take a sighting for face value, then it means what it means, as I stated. It's a science, but still kind of scary. He said this would also mean that the dynamics in science are universal. UFOs wouldn't ever be seen here if it wasn't. If they are just what the government wants us to believe, then all this would be futile, because I also know for a fact that they are real and solid objects. If they are aliens from within the universe, then they are, as best described, other humanoids or possibly spiritual, which according to what is known, then they are probably interdimensional travelers. We know the odds of a traveler from within the universe coming here are slim because of the law of c, speed of light. What we didn't know about was all the laws of gravity or zero-point energy, or at least till we test. We also don't know how many other universes there are or how many dimensions. The math says there are more, up to 12. The odd thing, if you think about it, the religious text describes some of those different dimensions. Amy asks, what does gravity have to do with it as far as traveling across the universe? I know about the slingshot effect and entering orbit. Well, Drew spoke up quickly, gravity can cause you to sag. This got a lot of laughs and lightened up the atmosphere. He was the funniest skeptical atheist I've ever known. Magic came back with, after he chuckled a bit, they aren't sure, but gravity may be the only thing that can break the speed of light barrier besides zero-point energy. Let me explain. It is like the butterfly effect in a way, only instantaneously. Gravity has to be ahead of c, or else everything would be flung out of orbit. And another theory suggests that everything is feeling the gravity across the universe of everything else, no matter how insignificant and far. Okay, now it makes sense, I guess. She then started to walk away, saying, I'll leave it up to you all. You seem to be on it and know what you're doing, as I am witnessing all of this starting to come true. I have to pee. Anybody want anything when I come back? Drew said, yes, bring us a sample. We all laughed as Amy flipped him the finger and walked away. When we were all together again, I asked, since I wasn't sure about their feelings about the spiritual aspect or the ramification of all this, I asked our little team the next important questions. What do you think about what we might discover, and should we hide the information from the government if we are successful? Do we hide it or show it to the world? How do we do this without losing out or getting ourselves killed? Look at the guy that invented the 100-mile-per-gallon carburetor. Walking back just in time and hearing this, Amy was the first to chime in. Her concerns are well noted on saving the planet, as all of us were. I wasn't expecting her to answer, but being fair, I listened, since she knew that we were going to be successful. There's this. The fact that at some point we will be some unknown and unscheduled object that will enter ICBM territory. I am sure all the major powers in the world would not react kindly to the sudden and unexpected start of World War III. Her sarcasm was noted by Drew. Okay, smart Alec, how do we avoid that, he asked. She went on, we need a flight plan that would accommodate that, as we worked that out with John, but even more. If this is awesome, or as awesome as we know it will be long gone by the time they figure it out, and what we showed during and after that, last but not least, if you can move something that fast and far with a fuel cost that is so superior and virtually free and affordable by a private individual or group, then you are a monster for not sharing that technology with an energy-starved world. So there really is no choice, is there? With transport capabilities like that, we could end world hunger instantly, given that much of the troubles of the world are caused by insufficient transport and fuel cost capabilities. With the inertial damper that you would have to develop for this to work instantaneously, you could end the useful traditional weapons forever. Bullets, missiles, bombs could all become things of the past. World peace could be a reality, so anyone who would try to keep such technology from the world would have to be selfish beyond all reason. I replied, "You're making great points. You have great morals and character, too. I love that." She went on, "These are aspects all of us need to know and think about, but another consideration is we would want to run this kind of experiment over the ocean or on an isolated area. We don't need anyone hurt, and safety is a prime factor and thought for others and ourselves." I kept this thought to myself. You're not a weak kitten, but quite the opposite. And I thought there was something noble about her. I was starting to admire her now, and I see what John, or what I think John, sees in her as far as intellect. "Please continue with your thoughts," I said. "So now we all know that one of the most important factors as a result of an invention as this one represents in theory is that global warming could be reversed and the CO2 levels would start to balance to whatever the normal levels are, and not to mention, but I will, less acid rain, less acid in the ocean, so it would be a tremendous advantage to us all to perfect it." We all knew now for sure what kept her here working with us for free, along with John now, which was my goal to begin with. We needed a pilot, and I would hope all of our goals will be reached, because this went beyond what I thought it could be. There might just be a monster hidden in this technology, I said, but it isn't from us or what we want out of this. I wanted this to come out and be used by all of us and all nations, but not as a weapon, but hopefully as a deterrent to war, and now Amy has brought it to light on her own. She was on the same page. She continued, "There would be no reason for war anymore if this is allowed and understood by all people of the planet. Most importantly, this shouldn't and can't be stifled by the government or any corporation through collusion or vast amounts of money, temptation, or greed." She looked at us and then added, "If we fell into any of these temptations, we would then become monsters along with those people who control energy. So we would have to think in terms of conspiracy factors that are true because they deal immorally with even lesser inventions." I admired her now and see her in a different light, one that just got switched on as a great rational moral compass. I complimented her. "Good points, Amy. You managed to bring up what I never thought about. Not only was she beautiful, but her heart and mind were sharp as a whip, and as beautiful as her appearance. She absolutely wasn't a typical stereotype of a blonde." "Okay, one thing Amy," Magic said. "There's no such thing as inertial dampener But a similar effect can be achieved by creating a gravitational field, opposing the acceleration of the vessel, and is by far more realistic than manipulating inertial mass. Such technology, while still non-existent at this present time, and is considered unlikely to be achieved in the foreseeable future. Then he said, "You got that from Star Trek, didn't you?" She turned and said, "Shut the hell up, magic geek." I thought to myself, I now see where she was worried, and definitely what I admired in her. She was thinking of internal inertia that could kill. "Wait a minute," Carl stepped up and asked her, "how do you know this is going to be that fast or good?" As she was walking away to tend to her work, she turned and said with a smile, "I had a dream about it. I'm not sure if it was a good dream or a bad one." Drew interrupted rather quickly, cutting off any more questions directed towards her, possibly from embarrassment of the matter of premonitions and psychic dreams, or just to protect her wise intentions, or just being protected because of the aggressive nature of the important topic. After all, it was somewhat political in its nature and against a skeptic's belief. "I agree," Drew said, "but we should hide it till we know what we have, and until we know no one can take it from us. Sharing it at the right time is going to be tricky. We still don't know if it'll work as well as we expect or want." Everybody agreed with that statement. This is where I realized how skeptical he was about the unexplainable and how cautious a skeptic can be, which is a good thing. Big M chimed in again. "The way I see it is this. What we have from physics now represents the low-hanging fruit, and pretty much most is gone as we know it. Most of what is out there undiscovered is corrections and expansions on existing properties in nature, GUT being the big exception that I can think of. It's expensive and time-consuming to develop new ideas. Anything as groundbreaking as general relativity is unlikely to happen more than once in a few hundred years, and then trying to apply it to make new technology is harder still." "Yes," Magic stated, looking for agreement. When he got it, he continued, "The only new thing the 30s and the 40s is since the 30s and the 40s is string theories, M theory, and that can't be demonstrated except through math, and the only new twist is math over all seems to represent binary code, which is unusual." "Yes, another form of information which is odd," Carl stated. Then Drew said, "Well, y'all know that I am a conspiracy fanatic, and I hate the powers that be. One thing is for certain, there's a possibility if everything was real that we read about or know about, governmental and corporate conspiracies, is that the greed involved will always find a way to repress the discovery and hide it from the public if it didn't serve their means, and by that I mean their money flow, and economic disturbances caused by such a discovery is their excuse," he added. "There is a danger." Carl spoke. "We will have to find a way to demonstrate this technology so they simply can't deny it, and I doubt that we will be in danger going out. It's when we are ready for re-entry, as Amy stated, into the global airspace where the danger lies. We get to that point, and that's where it might get really dangerous. We will have to brainstorm that challenge. Till we're sure we are safe to do so. Magic intervened and said, "Shut up now and listen, mates. Let him finish the part of the story now, because there's something else happening in the world, just as elusive as physics and as dangerous as greed." He pointed his finger at me and said, "Continue." Magic and I already discussed these things for years, and I started again. When I left for Indiana, I was late from California. I waited too long, and the plan now was to go to Florida from Stockton. My whole route had been changed. So how did the guy in the craft know this? If I was crazy, we wouldn't be here doing this, so who the hell is he really? Big M said, well, the only way is that he had to be there to see it happen, which means that he has control of time somehow. Correct, and that still leaves the question, who is he? He seems so familiar somehow. It's the strangest thing. So how do you know this? Asked John, who now, hours later, returned. Remember the rhyme? I asked him. How do I know you are telling me the truth? Yes, he replied. His response was, you'll know in New Mexico. That's what I got, remember? I continued. I let my girlfriend drive when I was almost out of Arizona, and that was before I got to New Mexico. I changed my route. I didn't know I was going to do that. It was a last-minute decision. Change of my plans. I didn't plan. I drove us near the border of New Mexico, at which point I was exhausted, and I let Peggy, who was with me at that time, drive. Then I slept for a while. I woke up for a few minutes in New Mexico, take over and drive, and all that I saw in New Mexico was a sign. Highway 666. I looked back as we got out to switch seats because I felt that feeling that someone was watching me. There was something off in the distance behind us in the sky that looked eerily like a gray, round-shaped craft. It was glowing slightly, and I only seen it for a few brief moments, but then it did a familiar movement. It approached, then it receded backwards, just as I seen the same maneuver done a while in the military. It then disappeared into the cloud cover, at which point I continued to drive. This time it seemed to want me to see it, and when it knew I seen it, it then left. It was calling in my mind to look at it till I knew I seen it. The odd thing was that it let me know in New Mexico of a truth, but what was it? I still couldn't figure that one out for sure. But later you would, said the voice in my head. As I reviewed these things from my past, I just didn't know at the time. I just kept watching as my reflections started again. It took 5 more years of studying and experimenting since then, figuring out the double-blind test flaw. So here we are today. So what else have you figured out? John asked. I made some good observations. It was kind of like watching birds fly and then learning about their wings. The question was, how do we make the same technology that demonstrated in a way that works but on a much larger scale so we can work with it? This was what drove me to find out the answers to the question, can it be a workforce? It's like what science tells us about wings. It wasn't about the flapping wings that a human can wear or a machine can reproduce. It was the shape that caused the lift, and then the thrust that mattered. It was simple. It was the shape that caused the lift. It was its simplicity that allowed us to learn to fly. But everybody that tried it in the beginning missed that. So we have to look at this type of technology in the same way to truly understand it, because there surely are many blind alleys. Next, Chapter 9.